Grade tests. Common factor. And generally, because that's a long word to spell there, we abbreviate that with the GCF, greatest common factor. Now, in order to study the difficult part, let's throw our minds way back to when it was simple. Let's do an easy problem. What was the greatest common factor of 8 and 24? Back in the day, when you were in 5th grade, you would do this. You would list all the factors of 8. The factors of 8 were 1 and 8, 2 and 4. And you'd list all the factors of 24, which were 1 and 24, 2 and 12, 3 and 8. And then you would look at all the ones they have in common. Well, they have a 1 in common, they have a 2 in common, they have an 8 in common, and the biggest one they have in common is the 8. That's when life was simple. Okay. Unfortunately, okay, you are going to be asked to find the greatest common factor of something like this. 6a squared b cubed and how about 8a squared b squared c? 8a squared b squared c. Anybody greatest common factor? Good, perfect. That means you'll at least listen here. Okay. By the way, this will get much easier. This is good. Don't. I'm going to give you the way that can always be done. It's a long, not complicated, but just a long way. By the time we're done with today, tomorrow, the next day, you'll be able to look at this and just go, oh, the greatest common factor is this. But because that isn't always the way it works with everybody, we go down, we'll lay down the steps. You got to look at the basics, and then you'll figure out what it is. So here is step number 1. Step number 1, you want to prime factorize both or whatever you have, all terms. And again, this will take a long time. When you get down to really doing it, it won't take hardly any time at all. So let's look at, if I'm prime factorizing this, and my other one is 8a squared b squared c. Well, what times what gives me 6 prime numbers? Anybody? 2 times 3, right? If I prime factorize a squared, that just means you break it down into a times a. And if I prime factorize b cubed, I get b times b times b. You with me? Prime factorizing this, 8 breaks down into 2 times 2 times 2. Wow, yes. 2 times 2 times 2. A squared is still a times a. B squared is b times b. And then you have this c sitting over here. Stop me if you didn't catch that. I'm just breaking it down to its very simplest measurements there. Okay. Step number 2 is, okay, you find what factors, 1 for 1, they have in common. Okay, and I'll walk through this here. Looking at the 2's, how many 2's do they have in common? This one and this one. They have 1, 2 in common. How many 3's do they have in common? None. Okay, so you can't do anything with any other than the numbers. how many A's do they have in common? Well, they have this first A, they each have one A, and they each have a second A. Okay, they each have one B and a second B in common. Okay, they don't both have a C, so it's not in common. And then step 3, when you get that, okay, you just remultiply. Which means you end up with 2A squared B squared. Okay. Now, the shortened, condensed, quick version of that, for those of you that math is relatively simple or quick for, just look at the numbers, 6 and 8. What's the biggest number that goes into 8? 2. Look at the letters, okay, and you take what they have in common, or the least amount of the numbers of the exponents that they have in common. In other words, they both have an A squared, so you can take that. This one had 3 B's, this had 2, but you can only take what they have in common, so you have to take the 2. This one had 1 C, this one didn't have it, so they don't have C's in common, so you can't take any of those. All right. Question, somebody had something up there. Lauren?
Yeah, isn't that like, or what do you call it?
It's distributive property.
Yeah.
Okay, but they get a little even harder than this, and that's why I kind of threw that out there. If you have something that looks like this, and that's what we're actually going to use it for, Lauren, but you need to go one step at a time. Here is 12 x to the 4th y z, y squared z, minus 42 x cubed y cubed z squared. Okay. The reason we do that is because the book will ask you to factor this. Yikes, is what you say to that. In order to factor it, you need to be able to find the least common multiple that we just talked about. And again, if you've got this, and if you think about it, you really don't have to do the whole prime factorization thing, but if it doesn't make sense to you, that's the one step you can do to get it. So looking at this, okay, let's try to do it without, well, let's do one more just without everything we just did here. We'll go faster up here. Did somebody, John, did you recalibrate this thing? You did. Apparently, something happened on the way to my mother's house. Okay, I'm going to do it one more time the really long way, and then we'll do another one where I just say, okay, if you get this, see if this works for you. Prime factorizing 12. Again, I'll probably skip a few things here. What is 12? 12 is 2 times 12 is 2 times 6, correct? Well, that's fine. 12 is 2 times 6, and 12 is 2 times 6, and 6 is 2 times 3. So this is what you get to get 12, 4 times 3. You have 4 x's, you have 2 y's, and a z. Over here, 42 is 2 times 21. 21 is 3 times 7. That's 42 prime factorized. You have 3 x's, 3 y's, and 2 z's. Okay. Now, finding the greatest common factor, what do they have in common? Well, number-wise, they both have 1, 2, and they both have 1, 3. Are you with me? Okay, no other numbers. What do they have in common as far as x's go? They both have 3 x's. So you have, let's just make it an x to the 3rd. What do they have in common as far as y's go? 2 y's, which is y squared. What do they have in common as far as z's go? 1 z. Oh, 1 z. Okay, so your least common multiple is 6x cubed y squared z. Everybody's good with that? Now the book is going to ask you to factor this, so in order to do that, you have to factor out the least common multiple. In other words, I take this, I wish I had room to do it. Do I have room to do it? Sure, let's see if I can. This all. It's gonna work? That's my biggest thing that I can drag with. Help here.
Make it small. Corners.
Make it small. Okay, good enough. So when they ask you to do that, you take the least common multiple. Okay, you take the 6x cubed y squared z, and you need to, I needed to write this over again, so I should have wrote it on top maybe. You take, I can fix it. You take the 12x to the 4th y squared z minus 42x cubed y cubed z squared, and you factor out this. So I need to put this outside of the parenthesis, and then I do my reverse distributive property. If I take 6x cubed y squared z out of this first term, what is left, or what times this gives you this? Well, 6 times what is 12? 2. I have x to the cube, and I need to go to x to the 4th, so I need to multiply by one single x. Y squared is already y squared, so you don't need to do anything with that. Z is already z, so you don't have to do anything with that. This times this will give you this first term that you started off with. Minus 6 times what is 42? 7. X cubed is already there. I need to go from y squared to y cubed, so I need a y, and z to z squared means I need a z. This is factored out. Take the least common multiple, or sorry, take the greatest common factor, remove it from those two, this is what you're left with. And you have to do this in complicated math because it helps you simplify something. I can tell you're ready for a quick and exciting one. How about this one? Should I let you try one on your own?
Yes.
8d squared c cubed plus 12d cubed c squared. And you are asked to factor this. So go ahead, find the least common multiple, and then factor it out, see what you're left with. And you don't, if you understand it, you don't have to do the prime factorization part unless you don't get it. If you don't get it, then you need to do the prime factorization and take it step by step. And then we jump to what? How this really helps us. This is like the second part, 2 of 3. Yes, find factorize it. Find the least, find the greatest common factor, and then factor it out. And then tomorrow, children, you don't want to be anywhere near this place. Good, because we won't. Yay! Oh, who's not going to be here tomorrow?
Whoa! The whole day?
Wait, what day? Oh,
Dang it!
that's okay. It'll take just about the whole time tomorrow to go through, explain, and do tomorrow's problem. It's not.
Skip.
Tomorrow is definitely one of those days when it's not hard. It's going to be very confusing, and if you're not a neat and organized person, tomorrow you will struggle. Or I should say, if you are a lazy, not neat, disorganized person, you will struggle. Alright, so here's what you should have got, and don't raise your hand, I want to answer, I'm gonna walk you through it here. Okay, greatest common factor of 8 and 12, hopefully everybody got that, which would be 4. Looking at the letters, you always take the group that has the fewest or the smallest exponent towards the letter. In other words, looking at the D's, okay, they can only have as much in common as the smallest exponent. In other words, this has 2 D's, that has 3 D's, you can only take out 2, so it's D squared. This has C to the third C squared, 3 C's, 2 C's. What's the most they have in common is just the 2 C's. Okay, so this is your least greatest common factor. Okay, how many people got the greatest common factor right? Okay, now you are going to take that out, reverse distributive property or divide, whatever you want. To go from 4 to 8, you have to multiply by 2. You've already got the D squared. You need to go from C squared to C cubed, so you need a C. Plus, 4 times what is 12? 3. You need to go from D squared to D cubed, so you need 1D there. You already have the C squared, so it doesn't multiply by anything. This is that factored out kind of thing. How many people got it? How many people didn't get it? Know that what they did wrong, or have a question mark? Nick.
Well, I did the highest, like I did C squared.
Yeah. See, and that's, believe it or not, that comes with. That is when we get to greatest, least common multiple. You do the most. It gets a little crazy when we start doing that. But no, you need to make sure you take the smallest. Now, where this comes in to help you is this. Here is going to be a problem. Write this down. Simplify. And they give you easy ones to start off with, so it's not such a bad deal. 6x. Yeah, maybe I should do it. No, yeah, write this one. 5x minus 25x squared over 5x. Here is the practical, well, kind of the practicum reportis thing of this. If you are asked to simplify this, you look at this and right away you say, well, can I cross off the 5x's? Okay, and you are not allowed to, because that is not multiplication, it's addition, and you can't just take a piece out of an addition thing. But if you can make this top thing multiplication, which is what this is, this times this is multiplication. If you can get a 5x up here as a factor, then you are allowed to cross it off. And that's why you always look at your top and say, okay, can I factor this? Can I take out the greatest common factor, and if I do get that out, will it cross off with something on the bottom? Well, let's look at it. What is the greatest common factor of 5x and 25x squared? 5 and an x, if you do what we just did up there. Now you have to do the parenthesis there. What times 5x gives you 5x? You have to have that 1 there. Don't think that ever goes away. Minus, what times 5x gives you 25x squared?
5x.
5x. Now you factored this, and because these are now this times this, you can cross off this 5x with this 5x, and you're left with just a 1 minus 5x. Okay. Now the only way this would ever cross off is if by some chance you had a 1 minus 5x as a factor on the bottom. Okay, that would be the only way this could ever cross off, because you can't factor anything out of it anymore. And that's all that's left. It's a subtraction problem. The only way to cross it off would be for those things to cross off there. So your answer when this is simplified is this. Wow, wasn't that exciting? Let me give you one more. You tell me what you would get in this case. Actually, that was probably the hardest one to do. Well, the 18x plus 45x cubed over 9x. Go ahead, simplify that for me. Jack, you done already?
No.
spelling bee today.
And
Now, let me just tell you, you don't want to punt, pass, or kick on the spelling bees because if the spelling bee doesn't take us long enough, obviously we have to have an assignment. So we should always be very excited about the spelling bee.
Yeah, we love spelling bee. Yes,
And we should try as hard as humanly possible. Wait, was Schwartz ever in the spelling bee?
No, he is. He's like the one I wanted last year.
He's what?
He's like one of the first people out.
He throws it.
I spelled like earth right on the.
I spelled wolf
I
wrong.
spelled it wrong. And I was like,
Always ask for the definition because if it's a word like ball, and you go, oh, that's B-A-L, oh, well, what if it meant crying? Like when you bawl when you're crying?
Then it would
Yeah,
be a
yeah,
trip.
yeah.
That's why you should always ask because a lot of words are like that. I think that
That's how I got him.
what ball
Oh,
is
yeah.
B-A-W-L.
What if you say orange?
Yeah, I'm
Huh?
Definition of orange.
A color.
Oh, the other
A
orange.
mixture of, huh?
The other orange.
What's the other word?
Red.
No,
it's like
Alright, Jack gets for an answer what?
I got 2 plus 5x squared.
Well, let's see what happens here. If you're factoring out the top, again, you're looking for something that's gonna cross off with a 9x, so hopefully that works. What go 1845, the biggest thing you take out of that?
Good morning, teachers and students. We are practicing a code yellow drill.
Cold
I'll
yellow.
repeat it. We are practicing a code yellow drill.
It's tornado.
Enough of this this year.
That's code yellow.
This is
I gotta make sure I look at my list here.
You have no idea what it means. This is something wrong in the area, I think, yeah.
Yeah, like this is psychoactive, the jelly.
No, that's blue. That's blue.
Code yellow, children, is just simply to keep the door, make sure the door is locked. Code yellow means this, that something has happened in Yorkville. Okay, it's not something that deals specifically with our school.
Or is it?
Yeah, he
What's got the rubber
He
band?
did, he
I know, but the only thing that keeps it locked is when it's latched there. Okay, so we just proceed, this is like, what happened if somebody, I don't know, robbed a bank in Yorkville and they were driving south on 47 or whatever, we were made known, we just make sure the shades are closed, make sure the door is locked, and I don't know if we put something in front of the, we're supposed to have something for the windows.
You probably should.
Code red is that thing we practiced the other day, which I got yelled at because we were loud.
Oh, yeah,
Next time that happens.
Miss Sean was so random.
I
I
want to
infected by your idiots as a remember.
Alright, back to this year.
Yeah.
We just keep going because really it's clear that whatever comes in. Alright, so you can take a 9 out. What they have in common as far as x's are just one x. Distributive, reverse distributive property, 9 times 2 is 18. 9 times 1 is 45. 5x squared. And then bam, 9x's will cross off. Now let me also tell you this, okay? If by some chance I could only factor a 3x out, and this was 9x down here, could you cross anything off? Yes, because this is, really what this up here is 3 times x times 2 plus 5x squared. And 9x is 9 times x. You can cross off a 9 with a 3, this would go away, but you'd still have a 3x on the bottom. As long as it's multiplication, you can cross things off. Yeah, you can cross the x off too, sorry. Okay, as long as it's multiplication, and it's its own factor, you could put a parenthesis around it and keep it at that, you can do that.
6 plus 15.
Yes, you would just have 2 plus 5x squared over 3. You can't simplify that anymore. Alright,